I ask that you will give your attention now to the first book of Kings, 3rd chapter, 5th verse. In Gibeon, the Lord appeared unto Solomon in a dream by night, and God said, "Ask what I shall give thee." This passage is rather unusual in that it seems to represent an opportunity for unlimited asking. It's all the more extraordinary since the God of heaven and of earth presents to a mere mortal, a creature of his making, this unrestricted privilege to present whatever petitions might come to the mind of that creature. Earthly rulers are usually inaccessible. A subject doesn't just walk up to the gate of the palace of the king or to the door and knock and says, "The king in, I want to see the king," and go on in and have audience. It's not that simple. It's not that easy. A citizen of this republic doesn't get a train or a plane and go to Washington and find the White House and go up and ring the doorbell and say, "I'm here to see the president on a little matter." It doesn't happen that way. You first have to present your name and give your cause to undersecretaries, and your case has to be screened, go through many tests to determine whether you're a proper person to see the president, and more than that, whether your matter is of sufficient importance to take the time of the president, who certainly has his hands full attempting to govern this nation. God is different from earthly rulers. Whereas you have to go through a lot of red tape to contact an earthly ruler, God invites his child to ask. God is delighted when his child asks him something. That asking, that very petitioning, seems to indicate a trust, a dependence, a confidence which delights the Most High God. When God took a body of flesh and came into this world as a son, he made himself accessible to his creatures. And in that body, he said, "Ask that your joy might be full." It just seemed that he presented the opportunity to those who wanted to ask him something, who wanted to make petition. Go ahead, help yourself, ask what you will. When one asks, he gives a kind of indication of the state of being which prevails within. Strange, but the thing that you ask, when you have opportunity to present a petition, the very thing that you ask seems to indicate what state of being exists within, because your petition is according to what you are or what you need. For that very reason, since it's so important, I'm asking that you consider with me the subject that I've drawn from the text, opportunity to ask. And there are in the scriptures numbers of examples of persons who made petition of one kind or another. Some were good and some were bad. But whether good or bad, let's examine them and let's learn from them what we shall do with our opportunity to ask, because we have a chance. And we certainly shouldn't want to waste the privilege that we have. Let's first notice some of the examples that are not so commendable. Some that are poor. We have had occasion to mention the young man who came to Jesus in the 12th chapter of Luke and said to him, Master, speak to my brother that he divide the inheritance with me. Now the very thing that man asked, the very petition that he presented, gave evidence of a state that prevailed within him. It showed him up just as though he were under a fluoroscope. It showed what was in him. And the very fact that it showed what was in him is evidenced by what Jesus said to him and with reference to him. Jesus said, first of all, when he made the request, man who made me a judge and a divider over you. And then Jesus said, not to the young man, but Jesus took the young man as an example, a warning, and held him up for the disciples to be instructed by, and said, take heed and beware of covetousness. What that young man asked indicated that his heart was full of covetousness. He wanted things. He wanted material possessions. And when he had an opportunity to ask, that's the first thing that came out of him. Oh, it would be interesting. It would be intriguing if we could just take a poll among men and women. Those that are here, I wouldn't dare to deal with those that are in the radio audience, too many, but those that are here, just take a poll of them. If you had privilege of asking any one thing you wanted of the Lord, what would you first ask? Now, what one would first ask would represent the thing that is uppermost in his mind, the desire that is greatest in his life. And when this young man had an opportunity to ask something from somebody who he felt was in position to do something for him, this is what he asked. Speak to my brother that he divide the inheritance with me. And Jesus warned from that young man, he warned us of covetousness. Because Jesus pointed out what his trouble was. His affections are on things of earth and not on things above. His desire is for that which is perishable. And he certainly needs help. There's yet another example that's found in two disciples of the Lord. Remember, James and John came to Jesus on one occasion and said, Master, we want to ask something of you. And we want you to promise that you'll do what we ask you before we even tell you what it is. And Jesus said unto them, what would ye that I should do for you? I'm asking you right now, what would you want to ask of God? What petition would you present to him? What would you beseech him to do in your behalf if you had opportunity to ask anything, anywhere? Ask what you will. It certainly would be interesting, and it would be an indication of what is going on in the heart. They said unto him, grant unto us that we may sit one on thy right hand, and the other on thy left hand in thy glory. What was the greatest thing in their estimate? A position among men. To be great among men, that's the mightiest thing, that's the most wonderful thing in all the world, to be great among men. Let's examine it. What is man? The psalmist asked that question. What is man that thou art mindful of him? And let me ask you, what is man that you should be so careful about a position with men? When men, every one of them, will have to go to judgment for themselves and have to give accounting for the deeds that are done in their bodies, then why should you worry about position or honor or place with men? That was a foolish asking. That was a squandering of a privilege of asking, because they wasted their petition on something that was not worth the asking. But I think the height of folly is found in Herod. Herod was the king of the Jews. And it is said in the scripture that Herod had for a long time, when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad. Now that's all right for him to be glad. One ought to be thrilled at beholding Jesus. Any sinner, any man in his iniquities ought to be thrilled and pleased beyond expression to see Jesus. But wait, Herod was exceedingly glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season. Herod had been waiting a long time for this opportunity. He had heard of Jesus of Nazareth by indirect methods, and for a long time he cherished that desire down in his heart. I want to see that man. I want to lay my eyes on that man, Jesus. But watch. And he hoped to have seen some miracle done by him. Herod's desire betrays Herod as being idly curious. He's not sincere. He's not deep in his interest. He's not true. He's not genuine. He's simply idly curious. And you know that there are numbers of people in the world today who go about from one miracle crusade to another. I think I better throw in this explanation when I mention a miracle crusade, that I am not opposed to healing. I believe in it because for 49 years, all that has been done for this body, Jesus has done it. But I am opposed to that thing of running about from place to place, wherever there is advertised a miracle crusade. Many people run not to become more like Christ, not to get nearer to Jesus, not to conquer the contrary whims and passions that burn within. But like Herod, they just want to see something new, something strange. They just want excitement. These are examples of things that are certainly not commendable. Let's get away from them. They're surely not good to hold in memory. Let's take some good examples. Let's think of Esther. You remember that Esther was a Jewish maiden, and when the king of Persia had deposed his wife for her insubordination, then they told him that he should comb the countryside for fair young virgins and bring a great number of them and screen them and make selection out of them, of the very one that was fairest among them and that pleased him most. They brought them in, and Esther happened to be among those that were taken. After they had been in purification and preparation for several months, then the time would come for each individual maiden to go in and present herself to the king to see if the king would delight in her. Whenever she was ready to go in, this was the rule. Whenever it was her time to go in, she had unlimited opportunity to requisition anything she wanted. Any toiletry, any cosmetic, any article of apparel, any garment, any finery she could ask. The record doesn't go into details. It doesn't tell us of foolish requests or vain or idle requests that some of those maidens asked for when they had the opportunity. We'll not concern ourselves with that. Let's take Esther and concentrate on her. When her time came to go in before the king, now this is her great moment. This is the time to ask whatever she wants. I can imagine that Esther was tempted to ask for finery that she never had possessed before. I can imagine that Esther was tempted to requisition jewelry that wasn't accessible to her before. But when her opportunity was presented, Esther was wise. She wanted to be pleasing, not to Esther, not to other people. She wanted to be pleasing to the king. The king was the only one that mattered. And although the king was an ungodly person, yet in this analogy, in this picture, he can stand as a symbol of the one to whom we want to be presented. When Esther's time came, she didn't know what in the world to ask. She put it up to Haggai, who was the eunuch or the keeper of the women. You know the king. You know what he likes. You know what pleases him well. I don't ask for anything, but not that you think will make me pleasing to the king. To make the long story short, when she walked in, Ahasuerus lost his heart. Esther really won him because she had the wisdom in her opportunity of asking. When she didn't know what to ask, then take counsel of someone that can direct her and guide her. And Haggai told her what the king liked. Haggai told her what things pleased the king. He likes to see women in this or that or the other, and she forgot all about what Esther wanted. The only thing that mattered then and there is what does the king delight in. I wonder if you're following along with me. The only thing that ought to concern you and concern me is what does it take to please the king. Not an inheritance, not a right division of the spoil, not a position with men and with women, not an idle curiosity, but the thing that should concern us most. What does my Savior want in me? And when you have ascertained that, if you're wise as Esther, you just concentrate on those things and seek them with all of your being. The text that we have announced concerns Solomon when he came to the throne to govern Israel. He was comparatively young. We don't know his exact age, but he was comparatively young. And if he had followed the recklessness, the wildness of many youth, he would have just reveled in that opportunity. I am king. I am absolute. I can do as I please. Not only so, but God appeared to him and gave him this opportunity unlimited. Ask what I shall give thee. Watch it. And Solomon said, Thou hast showed unto thy servant David, my father, great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart with thee. And thou hast kept for him this great kindness, that thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. I love that attitude of humility, of baseness in one's own sight. God hates the proud. God hates that lifting up of oneself and vaunting and boasting and strutting. God hates that. And here was a man that had an unlimited opportunity, and he is looking down upon himself. I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. Here's the petition. Here's the thing that he asked. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad, for who is able to judge this so great people? He could have asked for wealth. He could have asked for long life. He could have asked for the life of his enemies. He had an opportunity unlimited. Ask what I shall give thee. He felt his responsibility. Ruling in Israel was not a privilege alone. To him it was a responsibility to be discharged properly. Lord, I don't know how to do this job right. Give me an understanding heart. That indicated real wisdom within, that he didn't ask for riches, that he didn't ask for long life, but an understanding heart, that he might judge the people of the Lord and do the right thing by them. We come to you. You have an opportunity to ask what you want. What shall the Lord give you? What shall be your petition? What shall be your request? When you go before the Lord, oh, God forbid that you should ask him for a bigger house, or finer clothes, or a better job. Somebody might say, well, doesn't everybody want a bigger house, finer clothes, a better job? Naturally they do. But when you have opportunity to press before someone that really has the power to grant you what you ask, you ought to be careful what request you make. I hope you won't ask for those things. I hope that you'll not ask just to see some miracle done, that you might be engaged or that you might be thrilled. Yours is an opportunity to ask. And if you don't know what to ask, be wise as Esther. Is it not written in the scripture, we know not what to pray for as we ought? Is it not also written, if any man lack wisdom, let him ask of God, who giveth liberally to all men and upbraideth not? Then if you don't know what to do with your great privilege of asking God.
At this particular moment, I said, no, because the reel ran out of tape. The man that was recording this off of the radio obviously ran out of tape, but I think it's quite clear what Pop was trying to say to us.
When you have opportunity to press before someone that really has the power to grant you what you ask, you ought to be careful what request you make.